Welcome to UnHypnotized. I'm excited to announce our first sponsor, Quickbit, the Crypto Boutique. Quickbit is a Bitcoin-first company that specializes in hardware wallets, seed storage, education, and all Bitcoin needs. They've got tons of experience, provide fast shipping and excellent customer service, and they're authorized resellers of Blockstream, Jade, Trezor, Stampseed, and more. Quickbit is owned by my good friend Dale. He actually orange pilled me, and he is a wonderful person to do business with. I highly recommend checking out Quickbit. These are real Bitcoiners running a real business. Welcome to the newest episode of UnHypnotized. Today we have another wonderful special guest that I'm so pleased that we have on the show. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome you, BJ Dichter, to UnHypnotized. It's so great to have you here. Thanks for being here.
It's good to talk to you again. How you been?
Great, great. Yeah, you and I, we met at the Bitcoin Rodeo, right?
That's right.
Yeah, this summer. So 2024 summer in Calgary. But you don't live in Canada.
I do. I'm in Toronto right now.
Oh, you are?
I do spend most of my time outside of Canada in the US for a whole bunch of reasons. And then, I get invites to speak in different places. So I try to take those whenever I can and try to, bias towards a place that's warm, has palm trees, mojitos, and people don't speak English. That's kind of how I focus on things, right? ¿Me entiendes?
Qué bueno, qué bueno. See, now I'm remembering how we connected so well when we met and could talk for hours. So this is really just a natural progression of our friendship talking here today.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Sally. As it's starting to get cold here, I actually want some warmth and palm trees.
Yeah. Once I see when people say, "Oh, I love turning the colors of the leaves," I want to scream. Because that means snow is on the horizon.
Yeah.
That for me is depression, but whatever.
Yes.
What are you gonna do?
I was doing so well with working my circadian rhythms and like going outside right when I woke up and like going for a walk. And then I tried doing it now and I walk outside. I'm like,
well, you are in the colder part of the country as well.
I am.
It's still quite, it was 30 degrees yesterday in the middle of the day when I was driving back. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. Can you give our audience just a little bit about yourself as we get started in our conversation about UnHypnotized?
Sure. I guess for people who don't know me, I'm just some guy. And that's about it. No. So we'll start with my book because Christmas is coming up. Honking for Freedom, the trucker convoy that gave us hope. And this is about the very famous, infamous trucker convoy in Canada that went viral around the world, of which I was the spokesperson and the media strategist. So a lot of people outside of Canada would have seen me on alternative media speaking about it. And I have a varied background, which confuses a lot of people for some reason. I'm just very entrepreneurial. I've had different businesses in the past. And, I started my career as a gemologist. And then I got into, I focused on diamond grading, then invented a product for motorcycles, got into marketing, ended up in the motorcycle industry, ended up with my own business in the computer industry, in the tech industry. And well, before you knew it, I was running for parliament. And then several years later was leading the trucker convoy once I got very disillusioned with how corrupt politics is in Canada. And most recently, since the convoy, I started writing a lot and writing for a couple of publications at my own Substack, bjdichter.substack.com. And somebody at Zero Hedge, I guess, likes my content because for the past 3 weeks in a row, they've been posting my articles. So I'm very thankful and appreciative to them. And that's the short scoop. There's a lot more. But that's the basics. How's that?
That's great. And is it really interesting how entrepreneurial skills can be helpful in a variety of avenues in the world, but also for changing the world or for using your knowledge and your fortitude to, I guess, really stand up for something that you believe in.
Yeah, I just think it's, there's different types of people in this world, and we're all varied and diverse. But in general, we can look at people that are more conformist, or there are those of us who, you can spot them when they're little kids, when they used to get in trouble and they were on a personal basis with the principal of their schools. But that's the type of spirit that the world requires to say, hey, you know what? This doesn't work this way. Let's just wipe the slate clean, go full tabula rasa, and let's try something different. Oh, but this is how it's always been done. Yeah. And it ain't working well. So we're going to try something different. And I think that's just at the heart of the entrepreneurial spirit, at least from my perspective.
I completely agree. Some people call it risk, and I think of it the same way. Like, things just have to crash down that aren't working. We have to be willing to let them fall down so we can find a better way. And sometimes I notice, I'll notice different, say the cafe across from me closed, and I could have told you it was going to close
Yeah.
for like the last 2 years that I've been living here, because I could just see how they were really sticking to a model that actually likely worked even, say, before COVID.
Okay.
And, they were just sticking to a model instead of adapting to like what the community needed now. And I think when we think of our country and our world as a community and what we need now, it's pretty clear we can see what's not working.
Yeah, I also think much like, we all should go to the gym, and I should go more than I do, but, I try when I can. But we also have to exercise the other parts of our body, not just physical. We have to exercise, the muscle between our ears. And many years ago, I picked up this exercise from James Altucher, actually, of all people, who I ended up meeting and spending some time with. And what it is this exercise where you ask yourself, what are 10 things X can do to change whatever outcome they're looking for? So, for example, I don't know, you choose a topic. It could be a politician, it could be a business, it could be any sort of enterprise. And you think to yourself, like, what's something that's relevant right now? Like, let's say, I don't know, okay, the election, okay, in the United States. What's something that Kamala Harris can do to make sure to increase her popularity amongst Donald Trump voters? I'm not saying that's what I or anybody wants or should want, but I would go through that exercise and I would actually write them down. What are 10 things she could do to make herself stronger? And the reason I do that, and this is the whole James Altucher exercise, because it forces me to think outside of my current framing. It forces me to think, what do my adversaries want? And it becomes that creative part of your brain that you start exercising, and you start thinking about things outside of your domain. And I actually did that a couple of times during the trucker convoy, where I sat down, late at night and wrote down 10 things, like, okay, what are 10 things that the Canadian government could do to make us look completely unhinged, right? So I would write, and 1, 2, 3, 4 things comes right off the fly. But once you get to number 7, it becomes really difficult. And that's the point that you start exercising your brain. So yeah, I think that's also part of, the entrepreneurial spirit and the willingness to understand that none of us have all the answers.
Mhm.
And we need to continually better ourselves. And that's one of the exercises that I do on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah, that's great. And that's really entering into the stage of hypnosis or being unhypnotized, because obviously sometimes people just think of hypnosis as like some type of mind control or some type of programming. And I honestly don't really like talking about it that much because it's just a conversation I've had thousands of times. It's still a conversation people ask me or tell me I can't be hypnotized, or like don't come near me.
Uh-huh.
I don't are you hypnotizing me right now? Or men of course are like always saying something like, "Are you hypnotizing me right now?"
That's the
You
worst
know?
pickup line I've ever heard in my life, but yes.
Like, honestly, my whole body when someone says that to me, I'm just like,
Yeah, it's called the NPC pickup line for hypnotists. Yeah.
exactly. That's the total NPC. And that being said, I think it's always good to come back to this fact that everybody is hypnotized on some level. And like you said, your exercise has that ability to kind of expand the mind. And as soon as we expand the mind
Mhm.
and we're willing to consider other perspectives and let in other ideas and even possibilities, or even consider how someone else might be seeing something through their own lens, we're ultimately creating a freedom or a being unhypnotized, from the structures and the systems that we might have just even unconsciously taken on. And so when it comes to like actually, you know, being hypnotized, it's not really that somebody is necessarily controlling you. It's that are either not noticing, but I no, it's not even that. It's like someone's not controlling us. It's like we're not taking that time to critically think, to consider possibilities for ourselves. And a lot of times, if that's happening, we're just acting on fear. Like we're just acting on, like, we're getting triggered. And then we're just like taking the belief that feels like the safest, taking the belief that causes the action that would create like the most sense of like kind of a sense of safety, or a sense of like, okay, let's just protect ourselves, let's just survive, instead of like really thriving.
Yes. I don't disagree with anything you said there. I think also it's almost like part of the problem is people don't, it's not that they don't know. I think people haven't developed or at least been aware of understanding the importance of utilizing observing ego. It's like going to the gym and never having a trainer show you what to do. You're not just going to pick up a 50-pound weight and start curling it. You have to know to go to the gym to first lift up weights and then start small and work up from there. I was very fortunate as a kid that I was sent to a psychiatrist from a very young age because I was a little rambunctious. Wasn't crazy, but I was just, a little bit of, no,
Can't
rambunctious is
picture
the best way to describe it. Yeah. That entrepreneurial spirit, right?
Yeah.
And
Rebellious.
when you do that, and you get consultation from a young age during your developmental years, and you have somebody every week asking you to revisit some of the more emotional scenarios that you had throughout the week and then evaluate it. Why did you behave that way? Why did you respond that way? Why did you get angry? Why did you get happy? What could you have done differently? What have been a different strategy? And maybe I just feel like I'm fortunate enough to have that sort of, I call it my training, to be able to step back and do this sort of self reflection and self evaluation, which I
Mhm.
think, I hope, prevents me from, a degree of brainwashing. We are all brainwashed. Everybody is to a degree. People can talk to me about issues that I know nothing about. And if it's the first idea I'll get on that topic, as you know, I'm going to be primed for it. And okay, so it's going to be very difficult to pull me out of it, except for things that I'm really passionate about or mildly passionate about. Then you can do one of two things, which you can do many things, but you can do what a lot of people do is just hold on to one set of beliefs and just live in the confirmation bias frame, or
Mm.
do what I try to do, which is I want to see the whole chessboard. So I don't want to focus on listening to people who agree with my opinions. I want to focus on people who completely disagree or have different opinions than mine. That way I can see the whole chessboard. And so I always encourage people, you know, I used to say this when I was involved in politics, just to get the room to a halt, because politics, political parties are like cults, right? Everybody has to have the same set of ideas and values and opinions, which is, I think, what spilled over to the rest of our society. And I would say to a whole room of very, very conservative people that, yeah, most of my influencers were liberal or left wing, and they would look at me like, "Get out!" I'm like, "No, no, you're not understanding something. This is why I understand them. I disagree, but I don't need to chase confirmation bias all the time. I'm not that insecure. I'm very secure in my opinions, but I want to hear opinions that challenge mine." And then once in a while, you try to put together a list of, okay, what are things that I got wrong? And I don't think we do that enough either. But I think if you do all of those things and you challenge your preconceived ideas, or, those ideas that have been primed in you, then that's the best hedge that you could have against brainwashing. But it's never going to be popular. It's not going to be 100% perfect. We're always going to be subject to it, but it's the best hedge that I found.
Yes. And going back to what you said about your having that time with a psychologist from that young age made me think about essentially what I would do with people in my one-on-one sessions, and, in the work that I do as a hypnotherapist and as a mind coach, of helping them process and feel into the stuff that came up, that it does have the potential to just make us want to stay in that little bubble, the echo chamber. And I can really speak to this because even as you were talking about, the feelings that come up, and then being able to kind of evaluate that and look at that, and then especially when somebody is saying something that really kind of opposes your own values or views, like I was even now in my body just being like, ooh, because that's still uncomfortable for me, and it's something I'm currently doing more and more, and it's even on this show, having a host of guests speaking on all sorts of ways of looking at things, and it's been really healing. It's been really helpful. And even me, having clearly understood my bias and the brainwashing or the certain things that I took on, that I developed like a contrarian view of, and then seeing that view being challenged and being really willing to be new and fresh and like learning and not knowing things. And then I think that's a big part of this, like the discomfort that comes with that. And I think in our society, that discomfort does cause people to just kind of come back, or it can cause people, especially if they don't have the right support or the space to just feel into that discomfort, it really can cause people to just want to go turtle and just be like, everything sucks. Like, I'm just going to watch Netflix and like just ignore, because I don't think that we're really taught to that discomfort doesn't mean that what we're being told is right or wrong or good or bad, or that we can't consider it.
Yeah, if you find that discomfort, I think you're doing it right, and it's a lot easier and it's a lot lazier to live a life where we're never involved in any sort of discomfort, right? But what you just described is what I call, resorting back to factory default settings. So there's certain, topics I've engaged with people, and it's the same thing every time. And you know how people work. So I don't have to tell you this, but, the people listening who may not know, because most of us are primed with our opinions, especially those of us who surround ourselves with the same opinions that we have. You see this in the media. When I talk to people about, cultural events, politics, whatever, I can tell right when I talk to them, I can tell exactly what sort of media they watch just by their opinions. And they don't even realize they're regurgitating the exact same phraseology. That's how you know that they're brainwashed, because wait, that's not your idea. You saw that on whatever news show, because that's what they keep pushing, because that's what their PR people push. And it's really funny, I was in a space recently online talking about persuasion tools, of which there are many. And one of the strongest ones, or the simplest ones that's very strong, that's used all the time, is repetition, right? That's why you hear, like these hoaxes about US politics and Trump. You hear it over and over and over and over again. It's just through repetition. They're trying to implant it in people's minds. So for any Bitcoiners who are here that are, devs or computer people, like, I'm not a programmer, but I did grow up with a computer since I was 3, and started with a pet emulator, and then went to 64, and then to DOS and whatever. So I understand kind of the basics, and I've overclocked and blown my share of computer hardware in the past. But I see, and I think you'll appreciate this analogy. This is how I view human beings, not our general operating system. Their body, our mind is the hardware. Our conscious mind is the operating system. The BIOS, which sits in between, that's the critical faculty. And the CMOS, the lowest level of programming, the hardware program chip, that's your subconscious. And when you try to give people new ideas about things that have already been written into their code, and I had this recently on a certain divisive political issue with somebody who I know, and so I would give him, and I was trying to persuade both with the tools of persuasion and support it with facts, right? So you kind of, once you get them emotionally to buy in, then here's the facts that you need for post-rationalization. And I would get through to him, and he'd start to think in 3-4 hours. He'd be like, yeah, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. And then 4 hours later, boom, back to factory default settings, because he would go to, and I know who the person is, go to the person who's poisoning his mind with this stuff, and they would rewrite the code back into, the lower level programming, and he would be once again stuck in that silo. And I think that's what's happening in our society more broadly right now.
I agree. I think of it the same way, like it's the old track and it's the most worn. It's like a motorbike just going around and around in the dirt, and the well is just getting deeper and deeper. And so even if people will come out of that and then start to create a new track, it can be so quick that they just like fall back in, and that one's deep, and then they're back in it. And I think of that in the same way as like working with depression or other things too, because like that's a real mindset that comes with that default track. And, as you were talking about the computer and the operating system, I think that's really helpful for people actually to consider, because it also takes it away from, just, I don't know, I think it helps have compassion. Like it helps take it a little bit away from like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you change? Or like people come to me and they're like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I change? And, I'm kind of like, well, it's a little deeper than this. It's a little deeper than, especially when it's something that's really stubborn or people like really can't change. It's like sometimes that track or that program has been set from such a long time ago, and then is just continuously strengthened and reinforced. And it's like you said about the mainstream media, and how you can really tell by what someone says if that's their primary source of information for the most part about the world. And I was at the consignment store dropping off some clothes the other day, and I ended up getting in like a half-hour conversation with the owner, which you can imagine. I can get into these conversations in life sometimes. And it started off where I was just talking about the clothes, and like we were talking about my size and the closet, and how we just have to let go of clothes that we're never going to potentially fit in anymore. But then that started a whole conversation, because you can imagine like how many women are trying to, like, they're not letting go of those clothes in their closet. And sometimes it's even pre-birth of a baby. And just that default of like thinking like, until I get back there, I'm not okay. I'm not going to be okay. But then this conversation obviously got into like hypnosis and how that can shift, the programming, but then got into like the election and COVID, and then me being me, just talking about how, yeah, I noticed like when I was working with children that I actually stopped having to even do any hypnotherapy on them, because right at the beginning, when the parents called me, I could say, "Is the news on in your home?" And they would say yes. And I'd say, "Oh, the only thing you need to do to help them get rid of their anxiety is just stop having them hear the news." And it worked. Like, it worked every time,
Yeah, I'm not
And
surprised.
yeah, and I'm just me saying this, like, I'm not really considering, maybe she was open to the conversation, and then at one
Mhm.
point she was like, "Oh yeah, I do watch the news." Like, she sort of said it like that. And like I could tell by some of the things that she was saying, but it was a very friendly conversation. And I thought, this is actually part of this, right? If we can have those conversations like on the one-to-one scale, or
Mhm.
on like the scale where we're humans and we're all learning, and I'm not judging her. I'm just like, right, she probably just didn't really consider what this might be doing to her mental health. And then my last thing about this, I'll say, is that she then kind of started thinking about it and going, "Oh yeah, like I remember when like I didn't watch any news for like I haven't watched news forever." So I
Mhm.
didn't really realize, especially during COVID, like what people were being told, unless someone told me that's what people were being told. And she said, "Yeah, my dad and I, we used to like watch the numbers keep going up. And every day he would be like, the number went up." And she's like, "That caused me so much stress."
Sounds a lot like anchoring, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, and then when you know anything about hypnosis, like we're talking about in persuasion, it's like one of the fastest ways to hypnotize someone is to shock them.
Mhm.
And then right in that moment where they're like in shock, you can just go deeper. You can take them right into hypnosis. And, that's a very vulnerable state.
Mhm.
That's a very vulnerable state. So anything that's said in that moment is often taken as truth.
Yeah. When I thought we were gonna have problems, I mean,
Mhm.
already society was getting a little crazy, but it was in 2015, 15, or it might have already been into 16, I don't remember. But, politically, Trump was dominating Hillary. He was in the early days, he was absolutely destroying her. And then all of a sudden, she came out of nowhere and started climbing in the polls. And right around that time, I remember hearing about it in the news and thinking, "Uh-oh, that's not good." Robert Cialdini joined the Hillary campaign along with 5 other experts in the field who are well-learned academics in hypnosis, persuasion, human psychology. And I thought, "Oh, they're going to try to brainwash everybody," which is exactly what they tried to do. That's what TDS is. That's where it comes from. And that's why when you think, why are these people so irrational? It's because they've been programmed that way. They're stuck in a state of hypnosis. They don't understand that.
Yeah. Yeah, and they don't understand that the language that's being used, and especially now with, one of the ways that I introduce this even into a conversation
Hmm.
is usually just based on advertisements rather than politics, because
Yeah, 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 for sure.
politics people just get their guard up, right?
Yeah,
But even just on
I'm trying to help your analytics because right now we're going in election season.
oh, I think that politics in this show is perfect.
Hmm.
Like, that's perfect. Like, I made a bet with someone that Trump was gonna win, and they're so convinced, they're so convinced that
Mhm.
he won't, and I said, like, "Well, I think that," and he doesn't have any alternative media, like, he just watches the news,
Of course.
and I said, "Oh, well, I just don't think that you understand how much is on the other side growing and building." So,
Yeah.
I love dipping into that. But, just for the general public, like in just, bringing awareness to these things. I'll talk about advertisements. I'm like, didn't you ever watch a burger commercial and then want a burger? Like there's so many things and words and sound and music and like lights, and there's so many things now that are just allowed. Like at one point I remember when it was like a big deal, there was a book that was like something about Walmart like Walmart hurting the world, and just like exposing these like tactics that like corporations did. This is like in the Adbusters days. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
Bringing awareness. And there was like a real awareness and even a law that was like, you can't play the music. Like you can't have like, because under the music, there used to be like these suggestions for people to like buy more and like all this. And this was just became known, but then it became illegal. And then I was thinking, oh my gosh, we're so way past that point now. Like now we're just being like slammed like subliminally, hypnotically to like consume, to buy, to vote. Like it's just everywhere now.
And luckily there's now people on the other side in the Bitcoin world who are trying to learn these skills and use them for good. So there you go. It's one of those, it's a slippery slope until a group of people decide, okay, it's enough. We need to push back, which is, I think, what we're a part of.
And this is fun too, because that's the way I see it. Like, even say if people are very afraid of hypnosis and then they're very vulnerable with me, like we get massive transformations and shifts, and they'll really open up to me because these tools and this information can really be used for good. Because really the same way we hypnotize someone is the same way we unhypnotize them.
That's right. You're hypnotizing them in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
That's it.
And actually there was a Bitcoiner in a group that, because I've been helping people buy Bitcoin now.
Okay.
And there was somebody in the group that was like, ooh, hypnosis and Bitcoin, like they're kind of like that. And it seems like, and then I was like, oh, so like people don't see this as a good fit. And I was like, I just think it's perfect, but also it's like more unhypnotizing, because that's why I loved Bitcoiners so much, because and like felt at home with them, because I'm like, they already are unhypnotized on some level.
Yeah.
Because they see that, the current system of money is not for the abundance and well-being of all.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. But I wonder, I'd like to pick your brain a little, because I wonder.
A hypnotist is going to pick my brain. Now I'm getting worried. Tell me.
Deeper.
Yeah, deeper. I know the hypnotic scripts ain't going to work on me.
Are you sure?
Yeah, well, no, but yeah.
I won't get into what I say to men when they say they can't be hypnotized.
Well, hold on. Have you ever hypnotized a hypnotist?
Oh, of course. I mean, hypnotists are the easiest to hypnotize.
Are they?
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
And by the way, I'm not a hypnotist. I know very little about this. You're the expert. I just know the messaging and communication side of it. But yeah.
No, hypnotists are the easiest. Like even when I make my students hypnotize me as part of their practicum, they're always so scared. I'm like, well, I'm the easiest person to hypnotize. Like I've gone into hypnosis so many times, I go so easy. And in fact, like that caused me to like get scammed, because I'm like so hypnotizable. Like it's a little like and especially if I haven't, if I'm not trying to be hypnotized, like I can do that. Like I can go to a show and not be hypnotized. Like I took all my on my 40th birthday, I went to Vegas with like a few of my girlfriends and took them to like a really
sounds
dirty,
like you got into trouble there.
Yeah. It's like a really dirty hypnosis type of show. And I was like, no way am I going on stage, because I will be the freakiest of the freak in this situation. Like I'll be hypnotized and doing whatever, especially because it's like sexual. And so I was like able to be there in the audience, and he kept trying to pull me up. And I was just like, there's just no way. Like I didn't have to leave. Like I cannot be hypnotized, but when it's touching something, like say really wanting to be a part of the community and help someone out and like send Bitcoin, like I got hypnotized, right? So like the hypnotist is really easy to be hypnotized because we've already kind of opened up to that. And that's sometimes why people are like afraid of being hypnotized. But at the same time, I'm going to say it like this because this is the part that I think doesn't get talked about that much,
Okay.
which is like there is a certain relaxation like about life that, even say that that happened to me, that could be like a cautionary tale of like, don't let yourself ever get hypnotized because then you're more hypnotizable in the future. But at the same time, it's like there's a certain aspect to this of like, yeah, but don't we like to just sometimes let life guide us
Yeah.
and relax and
Mhm.
be open to hearing things, and it's okay if we take them on, or we'll definitely see stuff about ourselves in that. And that's what I saw. Like I saw that as like so perfectly designed to happen for me because of like the space that I want to continue to grow in and grow my business in, which is the Bitcoin space. And like if I'm going to help others or lead others, like it's really great if these things happen to me. And so I think that there's the other side of that, right? Like like if like I'm going to come back to picking your brain because
Oh,
you know, because the other side of that is like there is like a spiritual aspect to that, and there's like a connection. There's a connection in this type of even persuasive language or hypnotic language. There's a connection that's possible, and this is something that I was just so intrigued when I met you and was just, so attracted to you for because like you learned that and then you were actually able to put it into practice to to bring people together. And I'd love
yeah.
to hear more about that.
Well, in general, especially it was easier than I thought it would be. And I think that's because there was so much built up anxiety for a couple of years of everybody feeling as though they're living under the boot of authoritarianism. And, we saw mental illness started to increase significantly. It resulted in somewhat of a loneliness epidemic, as people describe it, which I think we're still suffering. And I knew going there that the original, when you would talk to people who were, setting up this convoy when they reached out to me, their idea is, yeah, we're going to go there and we're going to protest. And I suggested, no, we're going to go there and we're going to celebrate. And we're going to celebrate freedom. And we're going to celebrate being Canadian. And we're going to give people a message of unity for a couple of reasons. First, we don't want people to be continually suffering in this state of anxiety. We need to give them an out from that. Um, so all I did, I wrote about it in my Substack and gave a plug to Scott Adams' book as well, which is an excellent book on this topic. Was I referred to it as the greatest reframe, at least in my life. I just reframed it, and I reframed it from, from protest and cynicism and anger and depression and loneliness to freedom, loving, unity, coming together, giving us hope for the future. And it's funny, I read this statement on Jordan Peterson's podcast that I had written, I don't know, 40 minutes before. Like he's like, let's do something. Like, oh, 'cause I wanted to get it right. So I don't usually write things out, but this one I did because I wanted it, certain key points I wanted to hit. And, the legacy media, I think it got close to 1 million views right away. And the legacy media and the establishment tried to pretend, who always obsess over Jordan Peterson. All of a sudden, they didn't see this episode. Like, come on. And the whole message was about unity and coming together. And towards the end, I mentioned this in my last Substack, that I suggested to the political class and to the media, it's time to tone down the rhetoric and abandon the libelous smears of people indiscriminately, and try to, bias more towards Enlightenment values, which is what built our society. And it was pretty positive. But that was the whole ethos of what I was trying to do, because I knew if it was positive like that, then the chances of us getting having any sort of violence would be nil to almost nothing. And it was very funny. I remember in the chaos of the days when, after the police came in and started arresting people and everybody's trying to figure out what to do, truckers wanted to leave. I had to message that the road captains are leaving, trying to make everybody happy. And we're all scrambling around. And I remember watching, shortly after, when everything was shut down, I was watching some of the video of when the police were arresting the last few lines of people. And what did I see? I saw a bunch of rough around the edge truckers and protesters and whatever, telling the cops, "We love you. This is about peace, love, and freedom. We're all Canadian. We know you don't want to do this. We're on your side." And I thought, wow, it worked. It worked. I mean, because I think those are the type of people that would have been throwing punches indiscriminately much earlier. So that's really what I was trying to focus on, is we have to show the world that the government is the body that is the aggressive ones. And I think by trying to maintain this positive frame for the rest of us, I think it worked, and people will realize years into the future how it worked. It's still a little early. It's still only a couple of years out, and there's lots of legal cases and being slung from all sorts of political actors. Like, if you notice, I don't really get involved in that anymore. I got other stuff in my life. But, all the opportunists are all trying to raise money off of whatever. You do what you want. What I'm concerned about is in the future that people understand some of these, kernels of nuance of that event, which is why I wrote this book, which is all about all that positive stuff. Now, this isn't, there's a little bit of politics, but not very much of it. This is all about how we came together, which is what people need to hear more and more more and more, not just lessons, but they need to see some experiences of how positivity pays off over the long term. And I think we can maybe shift society becoming a little bit more positive and a lot less cynical.
Yes. It's all coming back to me why I fell in love with you the first time I met you. And I'll definitely add for everyone in the show notes where they can find that book and learn more about you, because I think that this is something that is growing in terms of the awareness of humanity. Like, you don't fight for peace. Like, that is totally contradictory.
Well, I think there's something, I think it's more nuanced than that. I think, like in all conflicts, whether they're positive or negative, there's many different tools in the toolbox. And sometimes you got to take out the tool that is the most deadly. But from my perspective, that is the last resort. That's the absolute last resort, when you have an adversary that's not willing to listen to you no matter what. I think for most things in the world, it's about engaging in conflict strategically and using what you hear people say it a lot, but I don't think they really understand the implications of it. Using the power of empathy and to say, look, this is why I watch people on the other side politically. And I try, there's a little memes here and there, but in general, especially when I'm face to face, I'm not going to demonize them because they have a worldview that I think is completely wrong. I think we're all a compilation of the 5 opinions we hear most common. And it's not their fault, because they're just never have access to the opinions that I and others have. And if they don't ever see the countering opinion, it's not their fault. And I think I think that's why you see this divide politically. Like, I'm not a big left-right guy. I think that belongs in 17th century France. But that's the framing that we use right now.
Yeah.
And so for argument's sake, let's use that framing in terms of like a media perspective. We see that people who identify as maybe more left, they don't, in my opinion, they don't understand any of the arguments from people on the opposite side, because their, if you want to call it ideology, is the mainstream. That's the mainstream media narrative. Whereas if you're on the conservative side of things, you can see much more clearly the whole chessboard. Why? Because the mainstream is the opposition, and then they use confirmation bias to look for people who disagree with that. But in that, they get to see more of the entire chessboard. So people who are more liberal in their identity are much more siloed, because they're just told, oh, don't watch Fox News, just ignore it. Okay, but they should be watching it. They should be watching things that maybe make them uncomfortable, they disagree with, just to make sure, just to, harden either the opinions that they have, or discover that, hey, maybe we're a little bit wrong on both sides, which is how it always is. Everybody's a little bit wrong. There is no fundamental ideology or philosophy that has all the answers. And this is why when I was on Michaela Peterson's podcast, I explained this. And I built upon Scott's kind of methodology and took it another level, which is, I like, people are you left wing, are you right wing? And I hate it. I think it's collectivists versus individualists. And as an individual, I like the goals of the left of wanting to help people and have a better world. I like the systems of the right. And I like the freedoms of libertarianism. And I also love the facts or the analysis of the objectivists. So we all lie within that triangle, and we'll plot differently on different topics, but it doesn't mean we're evil and we hate each other. We just have a different perspective on it. So, okay. And if we start talking to each other, as opposed to going back to our silos and just, speaking ill of people with different opinions, if we actually engage with each other, then we're going to find a lot more love in the world than we realize, because a lot of us have a lot more in common than we realize.
Exactly. And like you said, the pandemic of loneliness, which I very much agree with, even having experienced that myself, which, led me to move, but also in the aftermath of, say, the client work that I'm doing right now, I really see themes and the pulse of the people, like what's really going on with people inside their minds and their bodies, and, their imbalances. And like you were saying, that all of that divisiveness really creates loneliness.
Yeah.
Even if someone is really staying firm in what they think, but a lot of times that can feel lonely too, because it stops us from having those conversations or having those connections with other people. And I just think this is such a great conversation for everyone, because it's so easy. Like, especially once we find something, say like Bitcoin, to just be like, it's only this way and this is the only way. And that's something I've been loving about posting and writing more on X, because I get to hear like all these different opinions and perceptions of how, like, right, like there are many iterations of solutions. And I think rather than focusing on just one solution, it is more about coming together, having empathy, having conversations. Because, like you said, as soon as we start talking one on one, like me and the woman at the consignment store, we connect on a human level, where we both kind of realize, like, oh yeah, like maybe I was just kind of doing this hypnotically and not really realizing there's other perspectives. And I really like how you said, like, it's not their fault if they haven't had access to other media or other viewpoints. I really like how you said that, because I think it's so easy to be like, and I know I was guilty of this, like judging people for just being so close-minded. I'm like, why don't you use the little computer that you have in your hand every day and find more information.
But I think also what we overlook, and this is where we get the current loneliness pandemic, is what I call it, and I think we can fix it, and it'll take time. Is human interaction is a skill, and some of us are much better at it than others, and some people really struggle to get over that hurdle when they meet somebody new to develop, an authentic relationship. That is a skill. And building chemistry with people, that is a skill, to know who's the type of person you'll have chemistry with, who's the type of person you won't, right? Like I'm not into sports. I'm not a sport ball guy. When I was a kid, I was, but I just don't have time for it, right? So I'm not going to be, hanging around with the sports jocks a little bit unless we have something else in common, like Brandon Gentili. Brandon was a former pro hockey player. I don't know anything about hockey anymore because I haven't engaged since I was a kid. But because of Bitcoin, we found that core idea and value that brings us together, and we formed a very strong friendship. And now when I need to ask something about hockey, I don't know, I ask him, Brandon, what do you think about it? He's like, oh yeah, that guy's good. He was playing here. He's on the D1. And I'm like, okay, good. Okay, thanks, man. You know what I mean? And this is also the thing that I think you've heard me say this a couple of times, that it's undervalued in Bitcoin. And this is one of the things that it's going to help cure as part of this loneliness epidemic. Is it's the first time in a long time I've seen being able to interact with a group of people from around the world who have completely different worldviews and political ideas. And it's the one space where you can get in a conversation with somebody who's very progressive and somebody who's, a very social conservative and everything in between. And yeah, we'll disagree on a bunch of things here and there, a little nuance, certain topics. Okay, you know what? We're not going to agree on that topic. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about something else. But it becomes a window into seeing how people you disagree with, how they think and how they process ideas. And it's been many times I've been in a space where somebody says something like, how could you have that opinion? And I'm like, okay, I don't agree with you, but now I understand how you got to that opinion. So, okay, you're not crazy. You just have a different worldview. I get it. You know what I mean? And I think that's a big part of healing the world that we need right now.
Mm. Yeah, like if there's an underlying connection, if there's something like a real value that we can connect on, it's true. There is more space to have those conversations and to just have differing opinions and different views without it creating like such
Yeah,
conflict.
I think that, you hear that term when my business was on the university campus, when the world started to get woke, you would hear this term out of nowhere, these two terms, triggered and safe space. I never even heard these words before. Bitcoin becomes that safe space. It becomes that, okay, we're going to disagree on stuff, but we agree on the basic principles. Now we can have a talk, right?
Mhm.
And I think there's going to be more of that, not just in Bitcoin and other parts. I envision, me and Stephen Hicks talk about this, that, by the way, Open College with Stephen Hicks, season 2 is going to be releasing sometime soon. I'm the producer. Anyways, I think we're going to be heading into an era, a new golden age. We've been talking about this for a while, where we're going to see we call it either the Enlightenment 2.0 or the digital enlightenment, where it's going to be cool and fashionable, if you will, to be a little bit more intellectual and to have friends who disagree with you and say, yeah, we disagree on this, but let's go. Yeah, you have a little debate. That whole issue of human interaction is a skill. Understanding how much you can talk about an issue you completely disagree with, and then understand, okay, now it's time to cut it off because we're going to start to get emotional and angry about it. Let's move on to something else. I think that's a big skill that will help us hedge against the brainwashing as well.
Oh, this just inspired me
Mm.
because I am now kind of getting out more. I'm meeting more people. Plus, I'm coming back to some longer term friendships that did kind of take some space during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I was feeling like a little bit of a tension about just like I know that there are certain things that we really disagree on,
Hmm.
and maybe how I think or what I think are isn't that known to them yet.
Yeah.
Because I was for many years just never saying what I thought, because I really did grow up in a family where we don't talk about anything that makes other people uncomfortable. So you
Mm.
just don't talk about it. And
In
as
my culture, that's all we do.
that's why that's why living in Argentina changed me.
Yeah.
I would be like, "Why are they fighting about the milk though?"
Well,
But it
es la
really
cultura
changed.
latinos. Yeah.
Yeah, like, hablas que quieres, and, like, you just speak your mind, but then coming
Mm.
back to Canada and, like, my family and trying to do that would often create a lot of conflict.
Mm.
And, as I guess on some level, I was born a rebel, so it was inevitable that I was gonna stir shit up,
Mhm.
but I did learn to just zip my lip and just keep the peace, or to keep friendships. And then one of the biggest lessons I learned, over COVID was, like, that I had a lot of genuine, unauthentic friendships, or, like, people didn't even really know me. And, since then, just really being myself and sharing my point of view and learning that skill of, I could always do that with my clients. I could always do that in my work. I could always do that maybe with a few trusted people. But I think that what you're talking about is really helpful, because that's what I've been learning. Like, right, I can actually still share my opinions and my thoughts, and potentially even how I came about them, but also be cautious about, like, once we start to get heightened and activated. I think of it as being activated, which also is, like, sometimes I'll say triggered.
Yeah.
That's a good indication of, like, okay, let's maybe just step back from this, and we don't have to solve this. And solving this, it doesn't need to be done for us to, like, stay comrades or stay colleagues or stay friends or stay, building something better in the world.
Yeah, and I also think there's in certain scenarios, there's something to be said for just putting things on pause for a second and reminding your friend how much you appreciate them. We don't do
Mhm.
that enough. We don't tell people, it's not like I go around tell everybody I appreciate them every day, but once in a while, the people who are closest to you, they kind of need that reminder to understand that, I really do appreciate you, and I do appreciate everything you've done.
Mhm.
Vice versa, depends who the person is, and I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, and even, like, I really appreciate having this conversation and the opportunity to grow, right?
Yeah, very
Like,
sweet. Thank you.
it's like that's what it is. There's the opportunity to learn, and that's something I found to be like a kind of a base connection with Bitcoiners too, is like there is really an openness to, like, grow, evolve, learn, and keep, like you said, keep kind of intellectually stimulated.
Yeah, but also there's that, everybody's, especially guys, dudes, we're afraid of the emotional conversations. And listen, I'm not huge on you can overdo things all the time, but also you got to recognize when your friends or people you get close to are sometimes in need. I mean, listen, we had a moment together when we were out for lunch when we were in Calgary, and you clearly were dealing with an overload of stressful issues that you were dealing with, and I felt very empathetic towards you. And if you remember, what did we do? We did, the 5-minute journal, the morning exercise of, well, let's sit and talk, and let's think for a couple of minutes. What are the 3 things you're most grateful for? Well, let's get you into that state of gratitude. And you did. I mean, you were very stressed and emotional, but you went not very well, quickly, actually. What, 10, 15 minutes? We were able to work together to pull you out of that negative emotional energy, and we brought you into a positive state. And if I showed you a mirror, you would be able to physically see the dopamine being released and realizing that your life is way better than you thought it was 10 minutes ago, and you are extremely fortunate and more fortunate than most people that you know, right? And that was very nice to see.
Well, I'm glad you said it, because I was like, oh no, but only because like exactly what you're saying is to not just even recognize when someone might be in need, but to like receive that from someone else.
Well, I mean, but the thing is, and people don't, I talk about this on my live streams a little bit sometimes. I do live stream for my small little Discord group, that it's a two-way street. That firstly, you help somebody get into that point of discovery of gratitude, and they get into that positive state, and you've helped them overcome some adversity that's at the front of their brain and really doesn't need to be there at that moment. But you know what else it is? It's kind of, this is why Bitcoiners love it. It's a little bit self-serving, because when you're the person who helps somebody out of a situation like that, like everybody asks me, I get this a lot, why are you so confident? Why does nothing bother you? It's because when you do things like that and you help people, remember that bios and CMOS, that your subconscious is always watching you. And it's watching you be good to other people and to help other people. And when your subconscious doesn't see incongruence, it sees that you're congruent in the fact you're trying to help people and you're giving back to other people. That's where confidence comes from, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I think of it as a little bit different, but I do think of it as like the low mood is not to be trusted. You know, like I was in the low mood, and you helped me to, you know, you helped shine the light, you know, out of the dark, so to speak.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm not really a fan of changing thoughts or feelings these days, and especially in my work.
Yeah.
Because I think they're really valuable, and I think that there's a lot of times when feelings are being avoided, and that's causing a lot of anxiety.
Yeah. You don't want to suppress emotions. I get that. I agree.
And so I think even when I think back to like what we did, is like really what you did is you gave me that opportunity to just sit in how I was feeling and process and come back to myself. And I really like what you said about like when you're holding that space or when you're even helping others, like it does really create something different. Like I know without a inkling of doubt that I would not be this like goddess that I am today, you know, had I not done like 8,000 of these sessions or held all this space for other people. Because like I was not this. Like I met someone recently and he said, "Oh, I can't imagine what you were like in your 20s. You know, you're such a babe in your late 40s." And I was like, "Nah, I wasn't like this. Like this is my best self." You know, like I was tighter everywhere, but like I wasn't like this. And I 100% attribute that to like the work that I've done and the way that I've been able to help others, and like inevitably seeps back on me. And so I like how you said that about the subconscious, even though now I do tend to think of the subconscious more as the superconscious. I can still come to that, you know, the science around the subconscious mind of like, it is going to seek to execute the vision. And if the vision is, like you said, of this kind of confidence, capable of like helping other people, it does really just seep into your own self. Like when I think of like how many things I said to other people over and over to help them come, you know, process the dark, come to the light, as if it didn't like, you know, seep into me on some level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think this is also why, you know, something I've observed is you see these people in politics all the time, the people who are very conservative and very religious. And I've always had people because again, I know people on the other side who are very non-religious, and they would never really understand the churchgoers so much, and they would look at them not so much with disdain, but curiosity, like, why are they so happy? And I was
Mhm.
explaining this to somebody recently that there's a phenomenon going on, and there was a number of studies have been done on this, and another one was just released recently that affirms all of this. This is stuff that you'll agree with 100% and know. And that is, and this is what I was doing, we were doing together, getting you in a state of gratitude, that when
Mhm.
you get into a state of gratitude, firstly, the human mind can't process anxiety and gratitude simultaneously. And for those who don't know watching,
Mhm.
and when you are in a state of gratitude, you have dopamine releasing. And dopamine that's the addictive drug that we're all addicted to,
That's the
right?
one we love.
That's right. That's why, we kind of chase instant gratification and all that sort of stuff. And what they've found is people that are in a state of gratitude, that becomes their dopamine release. Well, what happens when you go to church if you're a churchgoer? It's all about thankfulness and appreciative of what God has given you. And so much that we have a holiday called Thanksgiving. I call it the dopamine giving day, right? That gets everybody into a state of appreciation. And you have these families that go to church every Sunday, the ones who go every Sunday. And why are they so happy? Because every Sunday they bring their family together and they collectively get into this state of dopamine release and appreciation and positivity. That's why they always seem even more happy on Sundays. And you see that also people who go to synagogue and other religions too
Mhm.
that are built on these same sort of premises of
Mhm.
being thankful. Yeah, that's what it's doing for us. That's the hack that religion figured out many years ago unscientifically, that if people are thankful for their circumstances, and we just did that, you and I together working through something, but it's the same fundamental principles.
Mm. Mhm.
And that's also, I think, why people are people who are into Bitcoin, people who've been in the space for a long time. I think that's why they're so impassioned by it. And the very passionate maxis that we know, it's because that becomes their dopamine release because they're appreciative. That's why you hear, Nico always saying Bitcoin or slavery. And you always have people, thank God we at least have Bitcoin now. The thank God for Bitcoin conference is
Yeah.
all about gratitude. So that becomes the protocol because becomes something that exercises that process
Yeah.
of being thankful and dopamine release in our lives, and that's why people are so
Mhm.
passionate about it. They're not
Mhm.
passionate about it, and you'll know this, and people are gonna argue with you're gonna get angry I say this. They're not passionate about Bitcoin because of it's immutable, it's scarce, it's decentralized, whatever. No, that's the post-rationalization. They're passionate about it because of the emotional tie that it brings to them, and which is what what we just
Yeah.
discussed about
Mhm.
having the dopamine release. And it just so happens they have a long list of things that they can use to rationalize it,
Yeah.
and that's how it works.
Ooh. I think that like something I said, maybe it was on a past episode. I said like, oh, I think I would have been in the dark night of the soul less time had I found Bitcoin, over the last 4 years had I found Bitcoin
Mhm,
earlier. Because in that same way, whenever you're kind of feeling some type of way about the world, and
mhm.
then there's that little glimmer of hope, like, "Oh, wait, though, there's this community, and there's this, like, potential, and there's this possibility that it could really help humanity," you know? And it's one of those things that pulls it out, but for me, I'm always like, the way I found true happiness in my darkest time, where I realized, like, this is my worst time in a lot of ways in my life, and I'm so happy, it wasn't through Bitcoin, but like through God or through source. And when you were saying that, I was thinking about this because sometimes I hang out in like the hypnosis Reddit threads and just say things and have conversations. And, someone was asking about a technique, and this technique helps to help people like have their subconscious mind speak for them. So it's a good dissociation to kind of help people like just let things come through. And then so I gave my 2 cents about the technique and how it can work. And then I said, but the thing is, people that are spiritual or believe in God, that you don't need any of these techniques, because like once they're in that relaxed state, we can just tap into like that channel that they already connect to. And now that you're saying it, have gratitude and get that dopamine going, get that feeling better, get that inspiration, and also that creative solution, which I think comes from that higher mood, if we're coming out of the lower mood. And so, that's probably like a whole other podcast.
Yeah, probably. We're just doing the 50,000 foot view today, right?
Yes. Yeah, we're going to wrap up right away. I think that just to come back to that for a moment though, because if we find something, say like Bitcoin, and we really do feel like because it's because it's like doing something in the world or creating that higher vibration in the world, so to speak, and we really want to share it, what do you think would be like the best kind of place to come from when we are, say, bringing it up, or when we are like talking about it to people that might not really understand what it is on a less rational level? Like, because there's a lot of people talking about, like you said, the scarcity and the the freedom, in a sense, like the freedom that it can provide for you to have self custody over your own finances, so that nobody can take it from you with the click of a button. So there is all these. There's tons of videos about the benefits of Bitcoin, but coming from this place that we're coming from, and the higher sort of self perspective, what would be like a conversation or an entry to conversation to speak about Bitcoin in that way, in your opinion?
I've talked a lot about this in very different spaces, and it just depends on the subject. I think the first rule is treat the person, if you're wanting to go through the process of orange pilling somebody and there's an opportunity, you have to treat them as an individual. Everybody's different, and find out what's interesting for them. So, I've had a whole range of different experiences because I've orange pilled a lot of people. For example, one particular guy who's a trucker, owns his truck, like an owner operator sort of thing. What resonated with him was that it's a pristine asset, and that it's like property, I told him. So if you hold Bitcoin as a pristine asset, you can then use that as leverage for a loan, as opposed to using your house. And his eyes like that. Oh, I'm like, yeah. He didn't care about the transactions, so didn't care about that. But what he cared about, and I thought he would, because I knew he was having, maybe it needs to get another truck or wants to expand or whatever. Like, well, don't use your home. Use, put money in Bitcoin and use that, because that's what I had done when I had bought my truck, right? So that's one example. There's other people, the freedom argument only works for people who care about freedom. And there's a lot of people who really don't care about freedom because they're the security hawks. They're afraid of everything. I try to explain to them that the freedom is the security. But for those people, I don't tell them it's the freedom that prevented Bitcoin from being seized in Ottawa. I reframe it as, because it's secure, because it's off the system, it's a separate system that you self-custody on your own, not dependent on government. That becomes your insurance policy. So God forbid anything happens, you always have that to fall back on. But then there's also the different, techniques. So you got to evaluate everybody who they are. but use the various persuasion techniques. And the only technique I see often in Bitcoin is everybody's trying to persuade with facts. The supply cap, all that. And I'm like, that is not persuasive to anybody. Nobody's going to listen to that. You need to utilize the tools to get them primed and ready to hear. That becomes the fake because, they're looking for something and okay, then I'm going to do it. But, they don't use, and you know what these things are, reciprocity, storytelling, common interests, visualization, pacing and leading, mirroring, repetition, all that sort of stuff. Those are the tactics that will get people at least opened up to learning what it is. And the best thing always open somebody's mind up. Once you can get them to emotionally be like, okay, well, what is this thing? You know what? Get them to download a wallet and just send them $20 in Satoshis. And once they have that, say, we did that. It went to my phone to your phone through a network that's distributed around the world that nobody can control. And either they go, well, I don't understand, which is often, and they get curious, or what you've just done is planted the seed of curiosity that will grow over time in the future. And if you're there, then you can always help, fertilize that seed even further. It's not a one conversation, one statement. Like, for people, how many sessions do people have to come to you for when they have a serious issue they want to deal with? It's over and over. They got to work through many sessions until they overcome whatever it is in their subconscious, or what you call the superconscious, that is holding them back. It's the same thing with bringing people into Bitcoin.
Yeah, or the paradigms, right? Like paradigms do not just fall down.
That's right.
I mean, sometimes they can, but that's more of a leap than like a progression.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Because then once they're open, like once those seeds are planted, then there is more of a curiosity. How does this thing work? Like how would I even do this? And I always love when people remind me of things that I know that I forgot.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that stuff I just use. Like it's just like even when I do hypnosis, sometimes I feel like I'm not even doing hypnosis because like I don't even really think of it anymore because there's just like after doing it so often, it's just part of my rapport. It's just part of my way of holding space for people. So that's a really great reminder and a reminder to everybody that really does feel that desire to orange pill people and open people up to Bitcoin that I noticed, kind of being a newbie in the space that there's a lot of people feeling really frustrated and bitter at trying to help people see. And, I think that that's where I always come from. I'm like, well, you might be kind of coming from a place that actually kind of causes people to put their guards up rather than disarming them.
You mean have fun staying poor isn't persuasive? What would you rate that on the persuasion scale?
Like 0.
I would go into integers.
Yeah.
That makes them anti-Bitcoin.
Yeah, like that's definitely like an FU. Like, don't even.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally.
Well, we should probably wrap this up, BJ. It's been so great. I know we can talk for hours. I loved catching up. Is there anything that you want to say in closing to our fabulous listeners?
Yeah, just don't say have fun staying poor to somebody who doesn't know Bitcoin, right? Somebody in the space is a different story, but somebody who doesn't know it, don't say that. And just be kind to each other. I've been seeing a lot of, for the past several months, a lot of negativity and vitriol. And I don't know if that's just the nature of the social media world that we live in, that we're all getting inundated with stuff. I think turn it off and, limit your time, your exposure to it. Go touch some grass, go swim in the ocean, just go have some time for yourself. Read a book, just turn your brain off. Not turn your brain off. I can't do that. But get into that sort of positive headspace and make that a goal to learn how to do that. We're never taught as kids how to regulate ourselves emotionally. We never learn that. And maybe that's a skill we should all develop. And if we start working on that skill, that will help, stem some of the negative cynicism that we're seeing around us all over the place. And honkingforfreedom.com. Christmas is coming up. I promise it's positive. Everybody tells me it makes them cry in at least 2 places. And they're happy tears, not sad tears.
I still have to read it. I need to read it.
You haven't read it?
I haven't.
Oh, come on.
I know. I can't even believe it. Like, I was thinking about this because I've been just reading so much, and I was like, wait, why don't I have it? I need to get it.
So tonight, you're going to read chapters 1 to 3.
Okay.
Make me that promise.
I got to get it first.
What do you mean? You don't have it?
No.
Okay, I'll send you a digital copy right now. Okay, chapters 1 to 3.
Yeah, if you send me it, I'll read it. Like, I was dying to read it since I met you, and then I got in all these other.
I thought I gave you a copy, didn't I?
No,
okay. I thought I gave you.
I think it's just because of like then things ended, you left.
Oh,
like,
no, you know why? Because a bunch of people wanted to buy the copies I had on, and I ran out. That's why I didn't give it to you.
Well, good. Even better. I can't wait to read it, and then I'll have more where I'll share my thoughts on it as I make some posts when this comes out.
Okay, cool.
I'll make some posts.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, that's great. And like you were saying, that's a great reminder for all of us to like come back to that space of self. Like, listen to a guided meditation or a visualization, or touch grass. Like, sometimes I walk to the river, I just put my feet like right on the ground or right in the water, or like go in the sun, or like, I think those reminders, like, to just reconnect with ourselves, but to the light part of ourselves, like to the part of us that's all connected, really, and feel into that oneness.
And also spend more times on your passions. Forget all the politics stuff. We all have things we're passionate about that give meaning to our lives outside of, chirping online about things we're upset over. Rediscover those passions, right? And that will really help us regulate ourselves emotionally.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because what are we living for?
That's right.
Like, what are we living for if not to love and enjoy and play and create?
That's right. Yeah, 100%.
Ooh, I'm so glad, because like there was a part of me that I was like, is this conversation going to be very political?
Unfortunately, we're inundated with that stuff right now, but I think we're coming out of it. And that's a lot of the brainwashing kind of forces us all into that frame. But, and I personally, I hate politics. I hate it so much. I just happen to be good at it, like knowing what's going on behind the scenes. That's why I engage. But even I too am trying to back away from it quite a bit and focus on other things in life that are more important, primarily my businesses, but
yeah. Well, this is just fabulous. I can't even wait till the next time we connect in person again. And just thank you so much for everything you brought to the episode today, BJ.
My pleasure.
Take care. Thank you for watching. Remember to hit the subscribe and turn on the notifications so that you'll know right away when we have a new episode with another great guest. And if this episode got you wanting to buy Bitcoin, reach out to me. I'm an agent with Bitcoin Well, and I have a link down below to book a time in my calendar. And simply just book a call with me and we can get you started buying Bitcoin. And don't worry, no pressure. Let's have a conversation and see how Bitcoin can improve your life. Ciao for now.